If you've ever caught yourself talking to you and quietly wondered, is something wrong with me? Then this video is for you, because for a long time, that behavior has been deeply misunderstood. People who talk to themselves when they're alone aren't antisocial. They're not socially awkward, and they're not broken. The truth is, they're operating on a wavelength most people were never taught to recognize. And in the next few minutes, you'll start to understand why. The longer you listen, the less you'll feel the need to force yourself to seem normal. You may not realize it yet, but this has never been a problem. It's simply the way you know how to stay with yourself. First, emotional regulation and self-healing. You don't talk to yourself because you're weak. You do it because when emotions rise, you don't run. You stay with yourself. When you're stressed, hurt, or overwhelmed, instead of forcing everything down, you let it out. You release it. You calm yourself. You even rehearse difficult conversations in your head or out loud. And when you do that, your emotions slow down. What once felt like a blurry mess starts to take shape. It finds words. And when emotions have language, they become far less frightening. That's how you pull yourself out of the emotional spiral before it pulls you too far under. Society likes to say, strong people don't need anyone. But real strength looks different. It's being able to be alone and still take care of yourself. Most people can't sit with their emotions. They grab their phone, they search for noise, they look for someone else to fill the space. You don't. You're willing to sit there and speak honestly to what's happening inside you. In psychology, this connects to emotional regulation and self-soothing behavior, the ability to calm your own nervous system without needing someone else to do it for you. People who can do this often have higher than average emotional intelligence because they don't rely on others to process their feelings for them. And no, this isn't loneliness. It's self-healing. You're not missing anyone. You're simply someone who doesn't abandon them, even in the hardest moments. Second, organizing and clarifying your thoughts. You don't talk to yourself because you're confused. You do it because your mind is very clear. It just moves faster than silence can hold. For deep processing minds, keeping everything inside your head isn't focus. It's overload. When everything stays internal, ideas stack on top of ideas, thoughts collide with thoughts, and eventually, there's no room left to breathe. So you speak, and the moment you do, your thoughts leave your head and enter the space around you. They stop being vague feelings. They become things you can see, rearrange, question, and refine. You're not talking to yourself. You're thinking out loud to solve problems that silence simply can't handle. Society teaches us that smart people think quietly, but the truth is, some brains don't need more silence. They need more space. Most people try to cram everything into their head and call it focus. They get stuck, blocked, and they don't understand why nothing clicks. You're different. You let your thoughts come out so they have room to stand, structure to form, and space to improve. In psychology, this is connected to externalized thinking and cognitive offload, when the brain is allowed to set some of its weight down. People who do this often handle complex problems better, plan across multiple steps more clearly, and create more effectively, not because they're smarter, but because they refuse to force their brain to work inside a space that's too small. This isn't a strange habit. It's a high-level thinking skill. You're not lacking focus. You're simply someone who won't work with tools that are too small for your mind. And here's the interesting part. When you speak your thoughts out loud, your brain doesn't just become clearer, it remembers better. So, have you ever wondered why saying something out loud suddenly makes it easier to understand and harder to forget? And third, memory and cognitive performance. When you talk to yourself, it's not just that you think more clearly. You're actually training your brain to pay attention, because your brain doesn't store everything. It keeps what feels worth keeping. And when you say something out loud, your brain gets a very direct message. This matters. Your own voice slows the thought down, gives it weight, and leaves a stronger imprint than something that only flickers through your mind. Most people consume nonstop. They read a lot, they think a lot, and then they forget it fast. Not because they're not smart, but because everything passes through too lightly. You're different. When you speak it, information turns into an experience. You hear it, you process it, you stay with it one beat longer. That's why you tend to remember deeper, learn faster, and connect dots other people miss. People say, smart people remember quickly. But real intelligence is knowing how to make your brain remember. You're not forcing memory. You're giving your brain a reason to hold on. And psychology has a name for this, the production effect. When information is spoken out loud, it's remembered longer, easier to retrieve, and more impactful than thoughts kept silent. So no, this isn't luck. It's a real cognitive advantage. You're not just working harder. You're learning the way the human brain actually works. And when you can think clearly and remember deeply something else starts to form. You begin trusting your own inner voice more than anyone else's. And that's when we reach the next reason. Fourth, a rational inner voice and trust in yourself. You don't talk to yourself because you're short on advice. You do it because, over time, you've learned something important. The voice you trust most is your own. When you speak out loud, you're not just thinking, you're listening. And when you listen long enough, honestly enough, you start to tell the difference between a passing emotion and what actually makes sense for you. Gradually, that inner voice stops being noise. It becomes an anchor. A lot of people need someone else to say, go for it. It's fine. You're right. They live off reaction, off looks, off approval. You don't. You turn inward. You check in with yourself. And you only move forward when it truly feels right to you, not just right for everyone else. Society often mistakes that for stubbornness or distance or being too introverted. But the truth is, you're not pushing back against the world. You're simply someone who refuses to hand over the steering wheel of their life to external noise. And when you live this way long enough, that trust becomes unmistakable. Not loud, not performative. Just a steady certainty inside. I understand myself. I know when to keep going and when to stop. And when your emotions are steady, your thinking is clear, your memory is strong, and your inner voice is reliable. The final question is no longer why you're this. It becomes, do you actually need to change it? And finally, not everything about you needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be understood properly. You're not the only one who talks to yourself, and you were never strange to begin with. So many people have done this since they were young. In some families, it's almost instinct, a way of thinking, a way of being with yourself. And once you see that, everything starts to soften. This behavior stops being something you have to hide, something you feel pressured to correct. It becomes simply part of how you're wired. You don't talk to yourself because you're missing someone. You do it because your inner world is already full. Society often trains us to believe, if you're different from the majority, something must be wrong. But the truth is, humans were never meant to come from a single mold. Not everyone needs silence to think. Not everyone needs other people to understand themselves. Some people understand themselves best when they speak things out loud. A lot of people spend their lives shrinking, thinking less, speaking less, trying to be less strange, just to fit someone else's standard. You don't need to do that. You don't need to become someone else to be accepted. So no, you don't need to fix this. You just need to stop doubting it. Talking to yourself isn't a sign of loneliness. It's a sign of someone who knows how to stay, how to listen, and how not to abandon themselves in silence. And if this is something you do, then no, you're not strained. You're simply someone who has a deeply healthy relationship with yourself. So if you've ever believed that talking to yourself was something strange, pause for a moment. Because people who do this aren't weaker than anyone else. They're simply self-aware sooner. They don't need the world to tell them whether they're okay. They've already heard the answer from inside. They don't chase constant validation because they've built an honest, ongoing conversation with themselves. And when you don't need to be seen in order to feel worthy, that isn't distant. That's inner strength. And that is the deepest kind of confidence a person can